So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today I have Dr. Mark Smith, the doctor. Hi Mark, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Adrian.
So Mark, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about you and also a bit about the work that you do?
Okay, well, I'm Mark. I've run tech companies most of my life. I started off as a career academic. That career ended quite quickly when I realised just how dull that was. And from that point to this, I run tech companies of one sort or another. And the latest incarnation is a company called Contact Engine, which uses various different channels to communicate with customers of large organisations, people like Virgin Media, Wix and others.
Okay.
And a lot of what we do is about improving customer experience.
Fantastic. So, you're doing some fascinating sort of things, because we met at a conference, a customer experience conference, and you were telling me about some of the stuff that you were doing with field service management and how you're trying to help them make that more of a strength rather than a weakness, because traditionally it's a weakness of where's my parcel, where's the delivery guy, kind of like where's my appointment, why is he late, all that sort of stuff. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing and how you're doing it? I mean, you don't have to give me the secret squirrel sort of stuff under the bonnet, but just give us a little bit of an overview of what you're doing and how you're helping.
Okay, the company began in a very different place. So originally we were called iPadio, and that rather peculiar name reflects the phrase Internet Protocol Radio. Although because of the iPad it became somewhat of a broken name, so we shifted it. But the original concept we had was being able to live stream a telephone call from anywhere in the world across any telephone. So we built the technology to allow us to live stream a satellite phone call or a mobile phone call or a fixed line phone call, capture that content and then stream it in real time. And we've had some extraordinary broadcasts as a consequence of that tech, a tech you can still use on iPadio.com today. So we've had broadcasts on the top of Everest, from the middle of the Atlantic, the Pacific. We were the only people broadcasting for a day out of the Egyptian Revolution, Tahrir Square, when the internet was closed down, but we still worked because we could broadcast an incoming call that became a conference call, for instance. So hugely interesting, very rewarding, and entirely commercially pointless, as it turned out. So we recognised a problem in business. And firstly, it was to communicate with mobile workforces. So the moment you had, sounds slightly sexist, but lads in vans, most of what we do in that context is with lads in vans. When people are moving around in the UK and other countries as well, you can lose data connectivity. So you have a smartphone, but it becomes a dumb phone because you're out of range. And we see that all the time. And Ofcom data indicates that around 60% of the geography of the UK has 3G or some kind of data connectivity. However, 2G, you get something close to 99% coverage.
Right, okay.
So you have a communication channel that you can use to reach people who are dealing with your customers, so the lads and vans. And if you want to inform them of the latest company performance or the latest product or the latest issue within the business, you have a problem with the mobile workforce, because often with these sort of lean management styles that people have, you can have an engineer for a company like HomeServe, for instance, who doesn't see their manager for a fortnight. And yet, as far as a customer's concerned, they are the company. The lad that turns up with a HomeServe jacket on is the company as far as the customer's concerned. So if they're not communicated with, that's bad. And so we were using our standard Internet Protocol Radio principles of sending text messages out to people saying there's a broadcast from your MD about what have you. Click this number to listen. They could then listen, they could then vote using touch tones, again quite old technology, and leave a voice message. So
but probably quite effective.
Yeah, very effective, very simple.
I love it. I don't like the idea where things get discarded just because it's old.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's like when people tell you email's dead, it's like saying writing's finished. Don't be so silly.
Yeah, I know.
So, it is the means by which we communicate. One of them, very powerful. Anyway, so we agree. However, that marketplace is interesting, commercially interesting. So we started to pick up some decent clients, lots of decent clients. Pharmaceutical companies, Ladbrokes, big clients of ours, wouldn't be not lads in vans, but actually the telephone is a really big communication device for Ladbrokes, because they have 2,000 betting offices, something like that, and they have a telephone and they have 10,000 staff. How do they reach them with timely messages? Well, the phone's actually a very powerful way of doing it. However, we then fell into, well, if we can do this so easily with our lads in vans who are going to appointments with customers, then why can't we extend that to communicate with a customer to solve a problem that is almost universal. Our experience across multiple sectors is 10% of appointments fail.
And what do you mean by that in terms of the, so somebody doesn't show up, or they're not there, or somebody's late, or?
From the customer perspective, I mean, sometimes it can be the company not turning up, of course, we've all experienced that, but more often than not it is the human condition to forget.
Yes.
To be in the wrong place at the wrong time, for an emergency to happen,
or
the last thing you want to
happens,
do is tell the person that's going to fit your telly that you're not there because your grand's not well, or what have you. Now this applies to the installation of a television, it applies to the delivery of a bag of sand, it applies in the NHS. The NHS have a special word, a phrase, 3-letter acronym, DNA, not deoxyribonucleic acid. My PhD was in biotechnology, so I know words like that. It actually stands for do not attend.
Right.
10% of people in the NHS do not attend appointments.
Right.
So this 10% thing, this theme appears across all sorts of businesses, and that brings terrible challenges for a company, which are all to do with efficiency and therefore cost. So if a van doesn't turn up for a company like Virgin Media, that can cost them multiples of £10. And if that's happening 1 in 10 times, and you've got 3,500 lads in vans, and they've got 6 days a week, then you do the maths on that, and there's a hell of a lot of wasted time and money. Customer ends up being unhappy, business ends up being unhappy. So we took the technology that we had. So by this time we've developed all sorts of channels of comms. So we've got text messaging, we've got outbound phone calls, we've got apps, we've got email obviously, we've got web obviously, we've got the whole video even. We've got this whole range of communication channels. So what we were doing, what we started to do, and we only began this 2.5 years ago, was working with the sort of manifest of the person delivering the stuff, the customer they're going to, making contact with the customer a little bit earlier in time. So 3 days before, 2 days before, 1 day before. Doing it across multiple channels. It might be a text message, it might be a phone call, it might be an email, it might be an app notification, it might be all of those things. Doesn't matter. You've got to reach the customer and therefore give them the choice of the communication channel they want, don't impose one upon them. If you do that, you can reduce that 10% dramatically. And that does 2 things. It brings the company efficiency and therefore cost saving, significant cost saving. But oddly and beautifully, it makes your customers happy as well, because they've been reminded that something's going to happen. Now, the reason we met at the conference, which was to do with customer experience, customer satisfaction in part, is there was a beautiful coincidence of what we did, which we've now realised how valuable it is. And because we set the appointment, or the delivery, or the thing, we arranged John to be with Jane, we know when it happens, and therefore we can ask some really simple questions using the various different channels. So we can say...
So that's the voice of the customer, sort of like...
the voice of the customer, NPS, all these words that people use for simple numeric scores and a bit of verbatim feedback. And if you ask in the moment, if you're asked about a meal, whether you enjoyed it 30 minutes after you finished the pudding, you're likely to respond. If you're asked the next day, you might. The next week, you've forgotten. 2 weeks later, maybe.
There's a major half-life on this.
Major half-life. And actually, it's worse than that, because if you ask ages in the future, most likely the responses you get will be the negative experiences. And so actually, you're skewing the results. You're getting small sample sizes skewed towards the negative. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do them early and late to balance that out, but nevertheless you get a problem. What we discovered, much to our surprise, because we were expecting, we figured, 10% response rates, that'd be good. Most your standard sort of survey monkey stuff's 2 to 5%. We thought 10%, that'd be nice, big sample sizes, everyone can manage that. What we actually get is somewhere between 50 and 75% response rates, because it happens in the moment. Right, it's after the thing you've just wanted has arrived, been delivered, been installed. And you've got 2 advantages of that. You can do the voice of the customer, of course, but you can also detect if there's a problem.
Yes.
And the answer to that, by the way, is 5% across all sectors of the world. 5% of things tend to go wrong. Okay, a little bit
Is that
less.
5% of the 10%?
No, unfortunately not. And I won't say by company because some are lower and some are higher. But roughly speaking, between 3 and 5% of stuff goes wrong.
Right.
It might be the customer's perception of the stuff going wrong, not necessarily it going wrong, but nevertheless that's the answer. And in the world of social media, it's really important to catch a problem, a spark before it becomes an ember, before it becomes a fire. So if you can say the first question you ask people is, because you know what the thing is, did your delivery for this arrive at that? You know, is your installation of this working now, or whatever it may be. So very specific, very personalised, with their name on it, so people realise this isn't spam. This is specifically related to them, personalised to them. If you get the answer no, 3 to 5% of the answers will be no, you can then immediately deal with it. Now this isn't machine based. The worst possible thing you could do then is take a machine to take a stab at trying to interpret what the problem is, right? Because life is more complicated than machines can cope with. So at that point, you're back in with human beings. So somebody is right, I'm sorry about that, we'll give you a ring in a minute. Right, you ring them up, you deal with it, you put the problem out, you turn what could be a problem into an advocate for you. For the vast majority, the 95 to 97% that are happy, you can then do the voice of the customer, NPS stuff. You'll get a numeric response, normally 0 to 10, 0 to 9 occasionally. And this stuns us, we get an enormous amount of verbatim feedback as well.
Right.
So we get people unbelievably willing to give more. And I think again that reflects a change in. I don't think it would have been like if the tech had existed 20 years ago. I don't think it would have been the same 20 years ago.
You think?
Yeah, I think people are singularly willing to give of their opinion.
Okay, and that's changed.
Yes, I think it has.
What do you think is driving that?
I think it's that everyone believes their voice is listened to now.
Okay.
I think, and that's a good thing for a brand as well to get that kind of.
And do you think that people then therefore feel compelled to speak up because then they're advocating for the change that they want?
Yes, I think they are, and that's the most interesting thing because I've sat in many a meeting.
How does that apply to politics then? That's an aside.
Politics is an entirely irrational thing which I can't possibly comment on. So I'm sure it would work fine, or maybe not. And that's what they would say.
Let's not go there. I'll edit that bit out.
That's fine. What's most intriguing about people's willingness to give of this information is that I've sat in many a seminar, many a meeting where people have said, right, we're going to put the customer at the heart of what we do. Now, everyone says that. There's not a company that has customers that doesn't say the customer is at the heart of what they do. Right? That normally is interpreted by, right, what we're going to do is we're going to get a focus group together. Right? We're going to get 20 people in, we're going to pay some excellent consultants, vast amounts of money, who are going to tease out exactly what it is this representative sample of 20 people of our 200,000 customer base think about our business. And then we're going to completely rearrange our business based on that feeling. No, you're not. You're going to spend a lot of money answering questions that you're kind of going to get the answer you want from because that's kind of how it works. If you survey people in a traditional way, you will also get quite low response rates. For the reasons I said before. Ask somebody something 2 weeks after it's happened, you will skew towards a negative and the volumes will be very low, the 3 to 5% response rates that you typically get for your average SurveyMonkey form. What we're getting, 50 to 75% response rates, and we're getting a decent amount of verbatim feedback. So much that certain of our clients are using the feedback because we can associate it with John or Jane that did the service, and we're getting more than half of the customer engagements they're having, we're getting verbatim feedback for. You can actually affect their training based on their performance of that day, if you want.
Right.
Because the customer will be saying, you know, he put his overshoes on, he didn't make my carpet muddy, and that was brilliant. Or the customer might say, the bugger walked across the garden, got mud all over my carpet, and I'm going to give you a 2 out of 10, for example. Now that person, the latter, not the former, can be, look, this is what's happening. So next time, don't leave a mess.
Is it also maybe a source of collecting ideas for innovation and things? Because customers notice stuff that people are doing, that say service men or women are doing, but they might not think twice about it, but the customer notices it and they write it down, and the company goes, do we do that? We do that. That's amazing.
You're one of the delivery firms that we do this work with. They get a lot of feedback where the driver has just dumped the stuff pretty much on the street.
Yeah.
Right, that gets a lot of negativity. On the flip side, some of the more caring drivers, shall we say, help people to take what is quite expensive stuff but heavy, into their house.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't really, if you've had to park up and get the back off the truck and drop things down, the extra few seconds, a minute or so, to actually put it in the house is easily justifiable, particularly if the feedback's positive.
Yeah.
Now, you can really embed that in the culture of the business if you financially reward the person that does it as well.
Yes.
Now, there's a danger with that. There's a danger that you get sort of... it would be my worst nightmare when I occasionally go to the States, particularly on the West Coast, and I have a meal of an enormous amount of highly calorific crap, mostly. Not that that's what I eat, that's just what I'm given. And then someone is constantly asking me if that's lovely, if that's great, if there's anything more they can do because they're being incentivised through your tip, then that becomes literally and metaphorically nauseating. It can't be like that with deliveries and installations because there's a certain amount of appointments that an individual has. They can't spend a lot of time pestering people with niceness. However, if they are rewarded with a small financial uplift from a 9 or a 10 NPS score, then they are going to, in the perhaps as little as 15 minutes they're with the customer, do the right thing, wear the overshoes, say please and thank you, be articulate, be informative, don't turn up in a muddy top or whatever other things that come out. There's one company, it's not one of ours, one company, I won't tell you who it is, who turned up when they fixed boilers, you can probably start to guess who this is, and they turned up, and I think this was a coincidence years ago, they turned up with a little bit of red carpet.
Right.
Which they put underneath the boiler, and so any bits of stuff that fell out, insects or brick dust or whatever that fell out, they took away on the carpet, and that did enormous amounts of good for them because it became the red carpet treatment. Really clever, really neat. I think it was an accident, but a really clever idea.
I'd imagine it's probably some service engineer has just started doing it, and then somebody spotted it and gone, "That's a great idea. We should just do that across the whole company."
Yeah, no, exactly that. And we all experience it. The lads and lasses that turn up to your house and do a decent service, or say something nice about the weather. They're the ones that you remember, not the sullen individual that throws the thing through the window.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to the 10% of appointments and things, because you did tell me a story about a client of yours at Virgin Media, and you sort of quantified the gains and benefits they kind of made from that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? Because it's almost like you did do the numbers, but can you tell me the case that is Virgin Media and how they've benefited?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great challenges in tech businesses is having a product that people don't need to think too much about paying you to have. Right? So for instance, if we'd started in customer satisfaction surveying, it wouldn't have been a great business for us, we suspect, because the ROI on that is really difficult to prove.
Yeah.
However, we didn't. That's a coincidence of the fact that we've set the appointment. So if you start by saying, you have a problem, 10% appointments failing.
Yeah.
How much does that appointment cost? Now, in the case of someone like Virgin Media, in the case of somebody like Wix, they know the answer to that. And I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's many tens of pounds.
Yeah.
If you multiply that up across the workforce, across the amount of days, then you can very, very quickly arrive at this costs you X, typically million. If our costs are a tiny fraction of that, to reduce that X million to half X million or a third X million, then the justification for working with us is dead simple. But you also get this rather beautiful, we save you money by increasing efficiency, but we've made your customers happy because we've turned up at the right time, they remembered, so they've turned up at the right time as well. And we've asked them whether it was okay, and in the 3 to 5%, and the answer's no.
By the way, here's all this data.
Yeah, a massive amount of data, verbatim information. We work in multiples of Hamlets as a measure of how many pieces of verbatim words we get.
Right.
I choose Hamlet actually because it's the shortest play that Shakespeare wrote. It's about 20,000 words. We did one particular project with a firm where we were only working with, I think this was a week's data with 20% of their stores, and we collected 1.5 Hamlets of feedback words from the customers.
30,000 words.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Crumbs.
A lot of stuff to work with. That brings its own challenges. You kind of have to get into, for global pictures, you need to do some quite neat sentiment analysis.
I was going to say that's big data, sentiment analysis, all that sort of.
Or you can be even more pragmatic and say, as long as the data takes me right down to the individual store, where there might only be sort of 10 or 20 bits of feedback, I can just email that through, because email is quite a good medium and people can still read.
Email is
so you email that to the store manager and they can actually look and they'll know who did the delivery or the installation or what have you.
Sure.
And they can actually cope with the sort of 20 pieces of feedback.
Or if it's within bands, I mean, you could do just random sampling.
Yes. You can, but it's and we do a lot of that. I think my sort of vision for the business is that we are in the world of big data we're generating. We do, today we'll have done about 50,000 bits of customer comms for various clients. So quite big, but it's getting bigger, by the week, by the month. I think the notion of changing your business based on what your customers think, I think we're actually at the, we're opening the door on that because of the volume of responses we're getting. You're not having to rely on the workshop or the what have you. You can actually look at that data and affect what your business is doing.
So this isn't co-creation. This is actually asking, listening, and doing.
Yeah, exactly that. It's kind of old-fashioned, really, but the tech allows you to do that in ways that really, until quite recently, you couldn't.
Excellent. So there are other sort of client successes or other areas or stories that you can share with us of stuff that you've done and you've seen and you've gone, wow, that's really interesting, or is that just the path that you're on right now, the sort of the remote workforce kind of like management, the instant sort of feedback, gathering the data, so it's almost at the end-to-end type thing, and then also the cycle back, the feedback into employee performance management and things. Is that's the full suite, I guess?
It is, with much of our commercial work. I've just, it's top of mind, so I'll tell you about something I submitted to it was a bid application at noon today that I've been working on, actually nearly literally for the last 48 hours. It's rather complicated, but it's all of the things I've described, but applied in a healthcare context.
So the DNA type stuff?
Yeah, but no, not quite that. You have a very significant challenge with the NHS, and this applies to healthcare systems anywhere in the world, where you have increasingly ageing populations.
Yeah.
You have huge expense when people are admitted into hospital, and there is a desire. 20% of people admitted to hospital will get a secondary infection of some sort, or a secondary problem.
Right.
Not just infections, it can simply be the stress of having to go to hospital, because none of us enjoy that process. So there is a move, and this movement's been going on for years actually, to keep people in their homes, their familiar circumstances, their familiar surroundings, and provide healthcare in home. Now, the big problems with that are the logistics necessary to make sure the healthcare professional turns up in the right place at the right time, making sure Mrs. Jones is appearing a lot in this conversation, so we'll choose Mr. Smith, which is my father. Anyway, so Mr. Smith, one of the problems he has, and this is very common, is not taking his drugs at the right time.
Right.
Okay. So you've got a problem of appointments, you've got a problem of reminders, and then you've also got other healthcare related information you might deliver using video, which is one of the channels that we're exploring. So this particular project is keeping somebody in their home, sending them reminders corresponding to the times at which they should be taking their medicine, offering them appointments, both sort of in their home and the nurses coming around on Thursday. Lots of reminders, text and phone, particularly phone. Older age cohorts will use fixed line telephones still, and they will have their mobile turned off if they're any of my elderly relatives anyway.
My mum does that. My dad does that.
Very, very irritating. I turn it on to make a call. Anyway, moving on from that, but also the other technical development that's happened in recent years is, whether people know it or not, lots and lots of people have got connected TVs. They might call them Sky, they might call them TiVo, there might be a smart TV, but Sky and TiVo correspond to probably 12 million subscribers, so maybe 30 million people, maybe 40 million people. I mean, it's very, very common. Those are interactive devices. So it's perfectly possible to deliver healthcare information, videos from the asthma nurse, for instance, and to pop that up on an asthmatic's TV when the first high pollen count is due.
So push notification type stuff.
Yeah, push notification. So making telephone calls, sending text messages, popping stuff on TV. That is exactly what Contact Engine does in terms of its channels,
Mm.
but in a completely different space.
Wow.
But essentially using the kit that people have already got.
Fascinating. Because I just wrote a piece around that I published, yesterday, which would be a couple of weeks ago when this goes out, and it was about how somebody told me about how you can use text messaging for inbound customer service rather than outbound customer service now, because particularly when it's related to toll-free or free phone sort of like numbers, because somebody's, there's a company in the States called Bandwidth who've sorted out all the protocols and stuff, so you can actually text somebody and have a conversation. I'm thinking, that's fascinating and interesting, because actually the technology is both, it's not new, but it's familiar, and people understand it, and the idea that it's going to get used and adopted is huge because people are comfortable with it.
No, I often use a rather irritating phrase. My colleagues say it's irritating, that communication should be the ring or the ping. And what I mean by that is that the phone that you're recording this on, the two things you react to are the phone call and the text message. Mm-hmm. If it's an app notification, it is one of hundreds, often, certainly on my phone, and it is so low down your attention that you will often forget it entirely.
Well, it doesn't feel personal in many ways.
Email to an extent on a small device. Email can be lost in the mail.
But it also goes back to the sort of data coverage you're talking about. Whereas, 60% of the, say, UK geography is only covered by, has data connections, but 96% has sort of the 2G, and therefore can take text and everything else. And so, it's not new, it's not shiny, but it works. But it's effective and it works.
It works, and sometimes you don't. We love shiny. We're a tech company. We are. This office is full of silly toys that we've bought and not used anymore and what have you. And we like to think we're at the bleeding edge of tech. Most people aren't.
Yeah.
And the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in the back and all those things. So therefore, and it's possibly due to my age, you therefore sit back and you think, you know what? Let's just keep it simple.
Well, it's funny because I used to work back in the first .com days, kind of in a building over there for a short while, and I always came up with I always thought about things particularly to do with tech. I said the challenge is that many people deal with the art of the possible, and actually, in actual fact, they should be dealing with the art of the probable, and that's kind of what I think. And there's a lot of people that are doing this new shiny sort of technology, and that's more in the possible bucket rather than the probable.
I had a meeting with a quite a well-known drug company, and they were, I can't tell you the drug because I think it's unique to them, but what they wanted to do was they wanted to provide supporting healthcare information to people that were on this drug. And so the big idea, this was a drug used by about 10 million people, maybe 2 million people, a lot, anyway, millions. Mm-hmm. And so they were going to use a QR code on the pack of drugs on an Apple app. Okay? So you add all that up, right? How many, let's say it was 1 million people, it's more than that, but how many of those million are going to know what any of that means, right? And they're then going to do it. I knew the answer, because I was 3 of the 200 people that had to go at it, and I was only 3 because I'd had to have 3 goes to make the bag of work. Now they were sitting there telling me about this, and this was, in my opinion, a marketing function inside a business that's got a new shiny toy.
QR codes.
And QR codes are, look, there's a place that of course there is. The whole sort of, the QR code and a bottle of wine, you've drunk 3 of them and you can't really remember your own name, but you can take and you get it and you know where to buy it from Waitrose. Lovely, right? I get that.
Yeah.
Not to help me with a bit of dietary advice on a drug. No, please don't do that.
Anyway, before we get stuck into all of that sort of stuff and righting all the wrongs in the world, what's Contact Engine's kind of plans now and beyond, and apart from world domination, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're British, so we don't do world domination.
We've done that already.
We leave that to the Americans. But all our software is our own, by the way. Nothing to do with America. I think this is quite uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. I think quite a lot of us have experienced the sort of the uncomfortable, irritating customer survey stuff and the poor communication or no communication at all. I had a terrible experience last week with BT. And the messages I got from their call centres all over the world were just, I mean, if I wasn't so cross, I'd have laughed. I mean, I was getting messages that seemed to wholly not relate to the conversation I just had. And I could imagine some poor bugger was sitting there thinking, I've only got these 3 choices. You know, that one will do. And then sending that. So we all experience really crap customer comms, sometimes brilliant. There's 1 or 2 people, DPD, I really admire.
Right.
The company that delivers a lot of your stuff.
The logistics guy,
They kind of own the full supply chain, not the making of the stuff, but the rest of it. And they do some very good work. We quite admire them. But the territory is kind of quite sparse. So we have an opportunity of bringing efficiency savings to a company, but we're always post-sale, by the way. We know your question about politics. We would never do outbound texts and phone calls to people around election times. That's poison as far as I'm concerned. Right? So we only do post stuff that people want. I think that is very open at the moment. We want to improve businesses' efficiency. We want to make customers happier. We want that to be quantifiable.
Yep.
There's no use sort of saying, here's a sample of a few words that people said, and here's an awful bloody word cloud that says, great. I want to say, that's a 3.7 and that's an 8.9.
Yeah.
And that guy did really well, and that woman did really badly. So let's change training and rewards and all those kind of things. I want to be scientific about what previously was more qualitative.
Okay.
And I think the tech allows us to do that, and the opportunities as a consequence are very high.
When you say the opportunity, is that in the UK, is it in Europe, or is that sort of beyond? Is the whole field?
The field is quite open. There's some technical challenges. The concept of international texting doesn't really exist. So the moment you step, the same sorts of issues you get with the sort of, the roaming nonsense when you go abroad and suddenly been stung for, watching a video for 3 minutes or what have you. That sort of reflects a kind of, capitalist created competition and therefore fragmented markets, which means when you want to do smart things, I'm working on a proposal at the moment where I'm trying to send a text message to France, Italy, Germany, get a response back, that's easy, do all that. And then they threw in Namibia, and South Africa's not too bad actually, Kenya's not too bad, they're very advanced tech-wise, interestingly, particularly mobile tech. But a number of other countries that aren't. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to do it. I think it's going to be, there's kind of ways of doing it, but they're messy and expensive.
Yeah.
So international, European, no problem, North America, easy, certain parts of Africa, certain parts of South America, certain parts of Asia as well. But it's not as, it's not like a server farm that will work anywhere. So you do have some challenges with that. Less so with a phone, interestingly, although sometimes you can get that problem as well. So having a local rate telephone number in countries in the Middle East, sometimes you can only do that if you're physically located there, if your company's based there, probably for security reasons. So there's some challenges, but the market gets easier for us. So certainly we already work across Europe with several quite well-known companies, and we work with a boutique American bank. I don't know what that means, expensive American bank, how much the word boutique means. I won't now say who they are. And so we're doing bits and bobs internationally, and there's no reason that you can't, we're doing outbound voice and outbound text. It doesn't matter what's said or written. As long as we get the response back, then it doesn't matter whether it's in Swahili or Swedish.
Fantastic. And so that brings me to my last question, which I always ask, and is this. What would you like to shamelessly plug?
I think that's all I've done, isn't it?
Well, just kind of making sure, just asking at the end. Apart from checking out Contact Engine.
Yeah, checking out Contact Engine, co.uk, I'm afraid. We haven't got .com yet.
Sorry.
But I think our challenge to people is we will bring efficiencies. We will make customers happier, and we'll prove it. So almost. We won't do stuff for free. Learned that lesson many years ago. People don't take it seriously, but we certainly do pilots at less than cost, and we've never not succeeded so far. So I guess the shameless plug is try us out, and it'll work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Thanks.